Hello, it's John Heaton, and today I'm going to try and give you my top 10 George Harrison guitar solos. And I've decided to include the Beatles and solo work, so it's quite a difficult task. Started putting together the list, and quite frankly I could have put everything in the top 10 from quite a short period, from say White Album through All Things Must Pass, but I thought of the earlier and later work, and I've come up with a little bit more representative list, I think, trying to cover more style than just his late 60s style. So we'll see. Before I get into the top 10, I just want to show you a few slightly more obscure numbers which you may not be familiar with. On the B-side of this Ringo Starr single is a track called Down and Out, which is quite a pleasant track, but its main distinguishing feature is the superb slide guitar solo from George Harrison. So check that out, it's great. This is an album from Mick Fleetwood, the drummer of Fleetwood Mac, 1981, and included in here, on here, is a track from the Tusk album called Walk a Thin Line, and guess who's playing the guitar solo on it? None other than George Harrison, and he does a brilliant job. And I mean, I wouldn't say it's as good as the Tusk album track, but it's not far behind with George's solo. I think it's gorgeous. So that's that. Splinter, a group on the Dark Horse label. This 1977 album, two-man band. Second track on side one, Round and Round, has a George Harrison guitar solo on it, and it's the highlight of the song. It's a very catchy song anyway. I don't think it was a hit single or anything, but George is playing guitar throughout this album, and he does a brilliant solo on this track. Well, not brilliant, but very distinctive and very nice to hear. So that was that. Now we'll get into the top 10, shall we? And this first one is from the Hard Day's Night album from 1964, and it's an acoustic solo, which George is pretty good at. He tried it over the years, and this is the earliest example, or one of the earliest, and it's very distinctive, and he chooses the notes very well. And I don't know how long it took him to come up with, but I think it's a great little solo from this album. Other acoustic solos worth mentioning, which could have made the list but didn't, because I only included one of that style in the list, would be Dark Sweet Lady from the George Harrison 79 album, and Learning How to Love You from 33 and the Third, 76, both of which are brilliant acoustic solos. But anyway, number 10, And I Love Her from the Beatles. Number 9 is also a Beatles track from here, and it's the Nowhere Man song with the very distinctive solo quite early on in the song, and I think it's always good when the solo is not kept until last and features quite early. The Beatles did that a couple of times, and very effectively on this one, Norwegian Wood. Again, the notes that George chooses are just perfect. Number 8 is from this 1973 solo album, Living in the Material World, and it's the first track on side 2, The Lord Loves the One. And this track is not everyone's favourite, and it's not even my favourite as a song. The lyrics are a bit preachy, but the song is largely rescued at the end by a pretty lengthy and very distinguished Harrison slide guitar solo. And that's why it made the list, number 8. Number 7 is some of these solos of George's are quite short. You don't always get the full 8 bars worth, and quite a few of them are just 4 bars, and I think this is one of them, Beware of Darkness. The first track, side 3 of this glorious solo album, and it's just almost like a culmination of the entire song when the guitar solo starts. It's just, the notes are just perfect, and it's not the flashiest solo in the world, but it's just very melodic, and George has a knack of choosing precisely the right notes for the song in context, and he does that there beautifully. Number 6, we've got a track from John's Imagine album called How Do You Sleep? The famous attack on Paul McCartney, and whatever one thinks of the lyrics, musically it's a brilliant number, and George's solo in the middle is just absolutely brilliant. He really is on fire. Maybe slightly encouraged by the resentment he was feeling towards Paul, I don't know, but he turns in a brilliant performance, and John commended him on this. It really is a highlight of the song, and Nicky Hopkins does the piano solo later on. So good group effort, but this video is about George's solo. So that's number 6. Number 5, I've chosen My Sweet Lord. It's an obvious choice, but the solo, there's no controversy about the solo copying anything. It's pure George, and it's the highlight of the song for me, that solo. Very distinctive, very memorable, and again quite sparse in the notes that he chooses. There's no great complicated technical playing here, but it's just George at his very best, melodic best, and just lifting the song to a higher level. That's what George's solos do when they're at their best, and that's what maybe George's albums later on in the 70s lacked a bit, when he concentrated less on the guitar on albums like Dark Horse and Extra Texture. They suffered because of that, I think. So what are we up to? Number 4, Hey Bulldog, the Lennon track from Yellow Submarine, the best track on here by quite a long way, I think, in my opinion. And again, George's solo, apparently he nailed this in one take, and Geoff Emerick describes it in his book. He wasn't always complimentary about George, but he was raving about the way George just laid down this solo in one take. And if that's the case, it's just genius, because it's just perfect for the song. It's loud, it's raunchy, and it just lifts the song to a new level. So we're up to the top 3. You may be able to guess a couple of these. Number 3, I've chosen Something from Abbey Road, his track, second one's on side 1. What can I say? What needs to be added other than the fact it's just a highlight of the song, and it's perfect notes, again, perfectly in tune with the melody of the song, just glorious in its execution. And again, I think Emerick in his book says that it didn't take George too long to nail this. I think there is one alternate take I've heard, but it's not as if he laboured over it for days. But he must have planned it to some extent, because it really is just so beautiful, and it's just genius all the way through there. And the number 2, I've chosen the solo on Let It Be. This particular version of Let It Be, the solo is superior, I think, to the single version. It's louder, it's raunchier, and this was like George's farewell thing for Paul, in a way, because they wouldn't play together after this, or not for 10 years or so. So January the 4th, 1970, he overdubbed this solo on top of the 30th, on top of the January recording, and replaced his 30th of April solo with a new one. And I think it's altogether better. It just makes the song, if that's possible, because it's already a brilliant song, but when that solo comes on, it's just sends goose pimples down the spine every time. So that's number 2. And number 1, I've chosen Give Me Some Truth from John's Imagine album, again, the first track on side 2. John Lennon actually claimed it was one of George's best ever solos, and I think it is nothing short of that. I think it's, again, early in the song rather than kept back to after the second or third verse. I think it's literally after the first verse, and he comes screaming in with this, and it's a full 8 bars of just glorious slide guitar solo, and he was doing a better solo here than he had done on virtually any solo on All Things Must Pass, which is saying something, and it must have spoke volumes for George's respect for John, that he could just turn out such brilliant performance for his former partner. And he does it twice on this album, and hence 2 tracks have made it into the top 10 from Imagine for me, and that currently is number 1, and may have something to do with the recent John Lennon Imagine box set, which I just picked up. So I'm sort of re-familiarising myself with that whole period, but this solo is my favourite. Thanks for watching. See you later.